And now we've come to the end of Doctor Who's original run before we go on to the TV movie and the series return. So this is season 26, which, I said in my previous video, I think this is one of the best seasons in Doctor Who's history. And it's kind of funny considering, it's only 2 years removed from its worst season with the same Doctor, but the characterization by this point was very different. Now, I think one thing the show did have working against it by this point was production values. If you look at the timeline as to when these originally aired, it coincides with season 3 of Star Trek The Next Generation. So you're looking at just a vast difference in budget and, what was available to them. And the show did not have much of a budget by the end. So they did what they could. And I think it just comes off brilliantly. Here, what we saw previously in season 25 was, the reimagining of Sylvester McCoy's Doctor into a much darker character. And in this, the humor's still there, but there is this deviousness that runs through the whole thing. Like, the humor is just a facade hiding something much deeper and much more maybe maniacal, which I think is really cool. After, 26 years, they were able to, just reimagine the Doctor, take it in a new direction, and then they were completely cut off at the end. But we'll take a look at the stories. So the season starts off with Battlefield, which brings back Nicholas Courtney as Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. Much older. It takes place, a few years, well, it would be in the past now, but it was in the future at the time. And here we really start to see, more of that digging into the Doctor's background. And, is he orchestrating things like, what's going on here? So it's, I think bringing back the big Brigadier was, a wise move just to bring it back. And, kind of originally the Brigadier is actually supposed to be killed at the end of the story, but they just didn't have the heart to do it, so he doesn't die. But it was kind of meant as a way of closing his arc. I think it was, fairly well done. Like I said, the production values were not what they could have been had they had a budget, but I think they did well with what they had. And then on to one of Doctor Who's creepiest stories, and in many ways one of the perhaps more confusing stories. We have Ghostlight, and that's another thing about this season. The stories are very complex and layered, and in many instances, you have to watch them a couple times to actually get everything, which I think also, maybe some people may have lost patience in at the time. But Ghostlight, which was actually the second story to be shown, but it was the last one to be shot. So here we're, kind of in the haunted house thing. And this one, it's still kind of into the absurdism and so forth, but it's all intertwined with the story. But the story itself is complex, and it took, like, when I first watched this as a kid, I had no idea what was going on. I just, thought the atmosphere was cool. But yeah, so. And then Curse of Fenric, which also kind of suffered from the same thing. There is actually a re-edit on this one in movie version, which rearranges scenes and brings in others and so forth, which makes it actually a lot easier to follow. But I think maybe for the time period, just in these two stories in particular, the writing was just too complex for a lot of people to follow. But, later you'll learn to appreciate, or I definitely learned to appreciate this. This was also one of the early DVDs to be released. I also believe, I think, actually most of these have actually been discontinued, which kind of sucks. So Curse of Fenric. Here it's kind of a World War II kind of Nazi thing they've got going, and just really cool atmosphere, brings in their version, I guess, of the Enigma machine and so forth, or Enigma translator, and all that fun stuff. So, yeah. And then the final episode, which also brings back the Master, which I think actually was probably one of Ainley's best performances. Sort of the craziness or over the topness, he did tone down a little bit, and here he also had a shiny new suit, and just came off as more evil. He's also kind of turning into a cat, which may have something to do with it. But this one is, this is really dark, and this, in many ways, you watch Survival and then you watch Rose from the new series. It's almost a continuation between them. It's like, in terms of the style, it's like, the 14 years or 15 years in between never really happened. And here it's getting a lot darker, and we're seeing more of what's going on here, and yeah, and with very little budget, they once again did very well with this. And there's Ainley just looking evil. But anyway, so survival, so really Doctor Who, after 26 years, after floundering for a little bit, ended up on a high note. And it would have been interesting to see what they would have done had this arc continued, because I know Sylvester McCoy had planned to do at least one more series, so who knows what they would have done with this. With Big Finish, they've gone in the opposite direction. They haven't continued with this arc, so it just would have been interesting to see what would have happened. But anyway, so that's the end of the original run. So now we're going to go, in the next couple videos, go into the TV movie and the various DVD format, or various DVDs that I have for the new series, DVDs and Blu-rays and all that fun stuff. So as always, everyone, thank you for watching, and have a great day.